There's a number that should stop every Browns fan dead in their tracks. $230 million. Say it slowly. $230 million. That's not a contract. That's a mortgage on an entire franchise's future, signed in permanent ink, handed to a quarterback who was given Cleveland almost nothing in return. And now, as the season looms, the Browns front office is sitting inside a building full of uncomfortable truths, staring down a decision that goes way beyond football. Because this isn't just about who starts under center anymore. This is about whether Cleveland has the courage to stop defending the past and start building something that actually matters. The question isn't whether Deshaun Watson can play quarterback in the NFL. We know he can, or at least we know he once could. The real question, the one nobody in that front office wants to say out loud, is whether the version of Watson that Cleveland paid for still exists. And somewhere beneath all the contract language, the injury updates, and the careful press conference answers, there's a harder truth slowly rising to the surface. The Browns may have already answered that question. They just haven't told everyone yet. But that's exactly what we're here to unpack. Because if you were paying close attention to what Andrew Berry said in front of those microphones, and we mean really paying attention, word by word, the announcement has already been made. It just wasn't delivered in the way most people expected. Let's start where this story actually begins, with the trade. Not the injury, not the legal controversy, not the Achilles, the trade itself. Back when Cleveland decided to go all in on Deshaun Watson, they didn't just write a check, they blew up their entire future to do it. 3 first-round picks, gone. A fully guaranteed contract worth north of $200 million at signing, now ballooning past $230 million by the end of this year. By any measure, it was one of the most aggressive, some would say reckless, acquisitions in NFL history. The Browns weren't gambling, they were going to the casino, handing over the deed to the house, and betting it all on a single spin of the wheel. And the return? Let's be precise here, because vague language lets everyone off the hook. The return has been historically poor. Not disappointing in the way a mid-round pick sometimes flames out, not underwhelming in the way a free agent signing occasionally underperforms. We're talking about a franchise-altering investment that has produced almost nothing meaningful in the win column, while simultaneously handcuffing Cleveland's ability to add the pieces around it that could actually make a difference. There's a specific kind of pain that comes with a sunk cost of this magnitude. It's not just financial, it's psychological. When an organization has committed that deeply to a single player, when that player's face is essentially woven into the identity of the front office decisions that built the current roster, cutting bait isn't just a football move, it's an admission. It's telling your fan base, your ownership group, and the rest of the league that you got it wrong on the biggest call you ever made. That's a terrifying thing to own, and it explains a lot about why Cleveland has moved so carefully, some would say too carefully, in making this transition official. But here's the problem with running from that admission. Every season you delay it costs you more, not just in money, in time, in the development of the player who could actually be the answer, in the faith of a fan base that has watched this franchise make promises for decades that never quite get kept. The sunk cost fallacy doesn't just cost you draft picks and cap space, it costs you years. And in the NFL, years are the one thing you can never buy back. Here's the nightmare scenario. Not the one Browns fans talk about openly, the one that wakes up front office executives at 3 in the morning. What if they let Watson go? What if he lands somewhere in 2026, gets a fresh start, gets healthy legs, gets a new offensive system and a staff that believes in him, and then he goes out and reminds everyone of what he was in 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020? Because that version of Deshaun Watson was genuinely special. You don't make 3 Pro Bowls and put up the kind of numbers he put up in Houston by accident. That version of Watson was electric, improvising out of the pocket, threading passes into tight windows, extending plays in ways that made defensive coordinators lose sleep. The 2020 version of Watson, before everything unraveled, was arguably one of the 5 or 6 best quarterbacks in the entire league. Now, imagine cutting him loose and then watching that version re-emerge in, say, a Pittsburgh uniform or a Rams uniform or anywhere, really. Imagine watching Deshaun Watson in 2027 go to a playoff game and remind the world what he once was, while Cleveland is still searching for answers at the position. That particular haunting, the what if we gave up too soon nightmare, is real. It has happened to franchises before. Baker Mayfield was released by Cleveland, and within 2 seasons, he was taking a team to the NFC Championship game. That story is seared into the consciousness of every Browns decision-maker who was in that building when it happened. You don't forget something like that. You carry it into every personnel meeting, every evaluation session, every press conference where someone asks you about your quarterback situation. And that fear, that very specific, very human fear of being wrong twice, is precisely what makes the Watson situation so difficult to navigate cleanly. The rational football argument for moving on is overwhelming. The emotional, institutional argument for one more look is also real, even if it's driven more by anxiety than by genuine belief. But here's what separates good franchises from great ones. Great franchises make the hard call anyway. They look at the fear, they acknowledge it, and then they make the decision that gives them the best chance to win, not the decision that protects them from embarrassment. And in Cleveland, it seems like that call is finally being made. So who exactly is Shedeur Sanders, and why does he change the entire calculus of this conversation? Because if you've only been following this situation casually, you might think the Sanders hype is just that, hype. A famous last name, a social media presence, a draft storyline that got inflated by the noise machine. But the football reality is more substantive than the narrative gives it credit for. Sanders came out of Colorado, is one of the most polished pocket passers in this draft class. Not the most physically gifted, not the biggest arm, but mechanically clean, extremely accurate, football intelligent in a way that translates. He processes defenses quickly, he goes through his reads, he avoids the kind of catastrophic decision-making errors that doom young quarterbacks in their first season. His mistakes, and there are mistakes, because every rookie quarterback makes mistakes, tend to be mistakes of inexperience rather than mistakes of fundamental flaw. And that distinction matters enormously. Watson's mistakes, as we've seen over the last couple of seasons in Cleveland, don't have the feel of a player working through something. They feel like a player whose ceiling has been permanently affected by time away from the game, by the physical toll of injuries, by the weight of everything that has surrounded his tenure here. There's no upward trajectory in the data. There's no "he's figuring it out" arc developing in real time. What you see is what you're getting, and what you're getting has not been good enough for a team that gave up 3 first-round picks to get it. Sanders offers something Watson simply cannot offer anymore: trajectory, the possibility of growth, the chance to watch a player get better week over week, game over game, season over season. Even if he struggles early, and he probably will, because every young quarterback struggles, those struggles have meaning. They're connected to something being built. They're data points on a development curve that could, if everything breaks right, produce one of the most exciting young offenses in the AFC. The weapons around him, it's worth noting, have been dramatically upgraded. Casey Camshin is a threat in the backfield who demands defensive attention. Denzel Boston gives the offense a legitimate mismatch receiver, the kind of target that young quarterbacks need to build confidence because the ball naturally wants to find him. Jerry Jeudy is still there as a reliable option within the structure of the offense, and up front, the Browns used a first-round pick on Spencer Fano, a left tackle with the physical tools to anchor that line for the next decade. This isn't the same skeleton crew that buried quarterbacks in Cleveland for years. This is a team being constructed with intent, with a young quarterback in mind, with the future as the organizing principle, rather than the sunk cost of the past. Todd Monken had nothing to do with acquiring Deshaun Watson. Let that land for a second. The head coach of the Cleveland Browns, the man who will run every practice, call every game plan, make every decision about how this offense operates, had zero involvement in the contract, the trade, or the commitment that defines the team's cap situation for years to come. He walked into this job with no fingerprints on the Watson era. That matters in ways that aren't immediately obvious, because it means Monken isn't protecting a decision he made. He isn't rationalizing a previous bet. He isn't fighting against his own prior conviction about what Watson is capable of. When he evaluates this quarterback situation, he evaluates it with genuinely fresh eyes, without the institutional scar tissue that clouds the judgment of everyone else in that building who watched the Watson experiment unfold in real time. A new coaching staff with no attachment to the past is one of the clearest conditions under which a young quarterback can thrive. History backs this up. Sam Darnold's career was declared over by most of the NFL world, and then a new situation gave him the oxygen he needed to remind people what he could do. Baker Mayfield, yes, that Baker Mayfield, the one Cleveland gave up on, needed a fresh context to unlock the version of himself that had always been there. Daniel Jones got another chance and produced at a level nobody expected. The NFL quarterback recycling business is booming, but sometimes the real magic isn't in the reclamation project. Sometimes it's in the fresh start for the guy who never got the right conditions in the first place. And what Shedeur Sanders is walking into, new weapons, new line, new coach, new system, is precisely the kind of environment where a quarterback who can actually play can separate himself from everything the draft profile said about him and just go out and perform. Think about it like finally unlocking a new character in a game you've been stuck in for 4 years. Why would you keep grinding at the same level with a character who's been capped for years when there's a new option sitting right there with a completely different ceiling? Here's where the press conference becomes essential viewing, because Andrew Berry is not the kind of front office executive who gives things away accidentally. Nobody who has been in an NFL building long enough to reach that level says things without knowing exactly what those words communicate. The NFL front office language operates like a code. Everything is deliberate, everything is calibrated, and the real message is often in the spaces between the words you'd expect to hear. So what did Berry actually say about Shedeur Sanders? He talked about a great offseason. He discussed real, specific advancements in decision-making, not vague references to improvement, but precise observations about how Sanders processes situations differently than he did before. He emphasized pocket management. He talked about situational awareness and ball security in terms that suggested someone who has been watching this closely, not someone offering diplomatic cover for an unresolved evaluation. And then he said this: he anticipates Shedeur having greater command of the offense going into the upcoming season. Command of the offense. That phrase is not accidental. That is not the language you use for a player you're still assessing. You don't talk about a player having command of your offense if you're genuinely uncertain whether that player is your starter. Command implies trust. It implies ownership. It implies that in your mind, this player is already the one who runs the room. NFL front office executives who have spent years operating in that environment don't speak with that kind of specificity about someone they haven't already committed to. They don't let words like that out into the world, where reporters will clip them and post them and analyze them unless those words are a message, and the message here couldn't be clearer. The Browns have already decided. They're just releasing the information in installments. Now contrast that with how Berry handled the question about Deshaun Watson, because the contrast is where the real story lives. A reporter handed Berry the perfect gift. The setup was practically gift-wrapped. Doesn't Watson's experience, his track record, his Pro Bowl appearances, his history of performing at an elite level give him a natural advantage in this competition? Berry declined the gift entirely. Without raising his voice or giving anyone a headline, he essentially said, "Experience is a factor, sure, but it doesn't give any player an automatic advantage. Everyone starts from zero." Everyone starts from zero. Think about what that statement means in the context of Deshaun Watson's resume. This is a man who was once paid like a top-5 quarterback, who threw for over 4,800 yards in a single season in Houston, who made back-to-back Pro Bowls, who was, for a period, considered one of the most dangerous playmakers the quarterback position had ever seen. All of that history, all of those accomplishments, and the general manager of the team that paid him $230 million essentially responded with, "Doesn't matter, start over like everyone else." That is not diplomatic non-answer territory. That is not careful fence-sitting from an executive who wants to keep his options open. That is a quiet, courteous, professionally managed elimination of Deshaun Watson from the starting quarterback conversation. The door isn't being slammed, there's no drama, no press release, no public confrontation, but it's being closed, slowly, methodically, with a smile and a wave toward the camera, and it's not opening again.
Here's the conclusion that all of this evidence points toward, stated as plainly as it deserves to be. The Cleveland Browns have already decided that Shedeur Sanders is their starting quarterback. The competition is a formality. The process is real in the sense that every rep in training camp will be evaluated, every throw will be graded, and nothing is being handed to anyone. But the outcome of that process has already been shaped by the people running the organization. Andrew Berry did not walk up to those microphones and accidentally praise Shedeur Sanders in specific, detailed, forward-looking terms. He did not accidentally fail to give Deshaun Watson any symbolic credit for his experience. He did not accidentally describe Talon Green in the careful, measured language of someone being developed, rather than someone being developed as a contender. Every single word was deliberate. Every choice was calculated. That's how NFL front offices operate. They don't make mistakes at the podium. They make decisions. And Cleveland's decision is clear. The franchise is moving forward with Shedeur Sanders as the face of its quarterback position. Watson and the other quarterbacks in that room were there as support systems, as competition that keeps Sanders honest, as depth that protects the team if something goes wrong, but they are not there to take the job. The job already belongs to someone. What makes this moment genuinely exciting and worth paying attention to, even beyond the drama of the Watson contract, is what it represents for the franchise as a whole. Cleveland has been trapped in a loop for years. Big investment, disappointing return, more excuses, more waiting, more defending choices that couldn't really be defended. That loop has a name, the sunk cost fallacy, dressed up in football language and presented to the fan base as patience. What the Browns are doing right now, even if they can't say it out loud yet, is breaking that loop. They are choosing the future over the past. They are choosing what this team can become over what one player once was. They are investing their time, their development resources, and their organizational energy into building something new rather than propping up something old. The dog pound has been waiting a long time for something worth believing in. A young quarterback with real weapons, a new coaching staff with no baggage, an offensive line being rebuilt with intention, and a front office that has, for perhaps the first time in a long time, made a decision based on what's right for the future rather than what's safe for the present. The Shedeur Sanders era in Cleveland isn't coming, it's already here. The Browns just need to say it with the depth chart, and then the real work, the exciting, frustrating, thrilling, worthwhile work of building something that lasts, can finally begin. Whatever you think about how they got here, this is where they are, and for the first time in a long time, where they are is actually pointing somewhere worth going. Nobody in the mainstream media wants to say this loudly, because saying it loudly requires acknowledging how badly this whole Watson experiment went, but that's precisely what's happening. Watson isn't being managed forward, he's being managed out. The question of whether he can compete is being answered not with film sessions or depth chart announcements, but with the careful calibration of language from a front office that has already moved on.
There's a pattern that emerges every time Shedeur Sanders makes forward progress in the public conversation around this team. Like clockwork, someone finds a reason to redirect the discussion toward a different quarterback. Sometimes it's Watson, sometimes it's a late-round dart throw. Right now, it's Talon Green, the 6th-round pick from Arkansas, who has somehow been inserted into the starting quarterback conversation by certain corners of the media. Let's be honest about what Talon Green is at this moment. He's a developmental prospect. He's a rookie who was taken in the 6th round. He's learning an entirely new system from scratch. And when Barry was asked about Green's development plan, he responded with 3 words: run, walk, or crawl. That is not the language of a competitor. That is not how you describe someone you believe is in the mix for a starting job. Run, walk, or crawl is the language of patience. It's the language of process. It's the language a front office uses when what they're really saying is, we're giving this kid every chance to develop. We have no idea what we have yet, and there is absolutely no urgency here. The difference between the way Barry spoke about Sanders and the way he spoke about Green isn't subtle. It's not something you have to squint to see. We're talking about the Grand Canyon. On one side, you have specific, enthusiastic, forward-looking language about command and growth and development. On the other side, you have deliberate, patient, measured language that is designed to communicate exactly nothing of urgency. When media members try to elevate Green into a legitimate starting quarterback story in Cleveland, that's not analysis, that's noise. There's a certain type of football coverage that can never fully commit to a young black quarterback being the unambiguous answer to a franchise's needs, so it constantly manufactures alternatives. Veterans get dusted off, late-round picks get amplified, anything to avoid saying plainly what the evidence suggests. The Browns aren't confused about their quarterback situation. Their general manager just told the entire NFL exactly who their guy is. Pay attention to that. Tune out the noise. The picture is clear for anyone willing to actually look at it. Here's the part of this conversation that doesn't get enough attention because the Watson debate tends to consume all of the oxygen. What could this offense actually look like with Shedeur Sanders at the center of it and a full complement of weapons around him? Start with the line. Spencer Fono at left tackle is a genuine investment in the future. When teams spend first-round capital on an offensive lineman, they're making a statement about how they intend to build. They're not patching a hole, they're laying a foundation. A healthy, developing left tackle gives a young quarterback something essential: time. Not unlimited time, because no line gives you unlimited time, but the kind of time that allows a play to develop, that allows a receiver to run his route, that allows a quarterback's eyes to travel through progressions instead of panicking under pressure. Add Casey Camshin to the picture. Camshin is the kind of offensive weapon that defenses genuinely can't ignore. He demands attention in the backfield, he can leak out into the flat, and his presence forces defensive coordinators to account for him every down. That matters enormously for a young quarterback because it creates space elsewhere. When a defense has to respect the run game and the dual threat element of the back like Camshin, the windows for receivers open up in ways they simply don't on teams where the backfield is invisible. Then there's Denzel Boston. If you want to understand why the Browns front office is excited about what this offense can become, start with Boston. He is precisely the type of weapon that young quarterbacks need to build confidence. A bigger, more athletic receiver who creates natural mismatches against coverage, who can go up and get contested balls, and who gives a quarterback a legitimate go-to option on the days when everything else is covered. Young quarterbacks develop trust with one receiver first, and Boston has the profile of that guy. Jerry Jeudy provides structure and reliability within the underneath passing game. He's not going to blow a coverage up with pure athleticism, but he runs clean routes, he finds soft spots in zone, and he gives the offense a security blanket that more experienced quarterbacks might not need, but that developing ones absolutely do. This offense, built around a quarterback who can manage it intelligently and grow into it over time, has genuine upside. Not Super Bowl contender upside in year one, let's be realistic, but the kind of upside that makes you watch every week because something could happen. The kind of upside that gives a fan base something to actually root for, instead of something to apologize for.